I wrote this probably, I think 7-ish years ago now, something like that. Long before I understood half of what I'm talking about now. I read it and I go, yeah, there's no way that I wrote that. And I know I remember writing it, but there's no way that was me. A preacher and a teacher walked into a certain place to bring news of their king, a place of vast darkness, where the men had a pale, sick pigment, and life had a flavor like bitter failure. With them, the preacher and the teacher brought only light and salt. In this place, they found the lost. Many of those lost ones ran from the sting of the light on their darkened eyes and the burn of the salt in their wounded flesh, for it did hurt to die to oneself. However, there were others that saw the light and tasted its flavorful graces. They found this light a greater guide and source of healing than the darkness, and welcomed the pain of its healing from the salt. There was a great comfort in seeing things as they really were in the light, and an incomparable trust birthed in the healing process. In time, they too became like the preacher and the teacher and went forth into bitter darkness with salt and light. Together, they have, under the guidance of that Holy Spirit, built quite the city. It has been lifted up and set up high, as on a hill, and it cannot be hidden. There is unalterable glory, and to this kingdom of peculiar priests there will be no end. Their king is over all. Blessed be he. What do you guys think of that?
It kind of alluded back to the Matthew chapter 5, talking about being salt and being light. And when you think about salt, especially in the ancient Near East, the primary functions of salt was to preserve, right, or to make flavorful. And then you think about light, and what light is always the governing agent by which we see everything else, by which we give things meaning, establish order. In the sense of that parable, it all just kind of points back to Christ being those things for us. And then when we become molded and fashioned into his image and likeness, we become those things to a darkened world.
Salt was always sprinkled on top of all the sacrifices in Leviticus 2:13 because they were all food gifts to God. When Jesus says, "You are the salt of the world," it sounds like he's saying things like, "You are the thing that makes the sacrifice of the world be acceptable, be pleasing, be a beautiful aroma." And that's why, like Paul says, and he says that like his whole mission is to bring the Gentiles as an acceptable sacrifice. So, I mean, the whole idea there is that, like when you were talking about like that kingdom of priests that has no end in your, that's what we are called to be, is to be that kingdom of priests, a holy nation. We are the continuation of the ecclesia of Israel. And when we do that correctly, we are sprinkling the salt of our light over top of the sacrifices of the people that we are interacting with day to day. And based on the quality of our salt and our light is going to have a lot to say about how acceptable they will be, and how acceptable our own offering of that sacrifice is going to be.
Can you read that the last 2 lines?
There is unalterable glory, and to this kingdom of peculiar priests there will be no end. Their king is over all. Blessed be he.
I really, really like this. I want to spend more time with it. There's so many little connections that you've made with salt and light, kingdom of priests. One of the things that this reminded me of is how often what our role is that we're calling people out of that kingdom of darkness, turning them into priests, and then sending them back as lights in that darkness. It's an interesting transformational type focus. I really like the way that you put this in words.